You see this pony here? This is Tilly. She looks pretty relaxed and happy, right? Well, it hasn't always been that way, so let's go back to the beginning. Tilly got here in April 2023. She's a 10-year-old mare that was bought off of her video because she looked like an absolute saint and I thought she'd make a great addition to my lesson program. There is a little more risk involved when you don't actually go try a horse, but for me personally, I don't worry too much about doing things that way because as a trainer, even if the horse ends up a little greener than expected, I don't mind working with it to make it what I was wanting. I think in Tilly's case, she may have been the perfect pony like she was in her sale video if I had actually gone to try her, but I still think she would have shown up to my barn exactly how she did. My point in saying that is that I don't want it to come across like I in any way blame the previous owner for how Tilly was when she got here, and I don't want to make it seem like this is always what will happen if you buy sight unseen. This is the first time I've ever seen a horse show up the complete opposite of their sale ad. And in Tilly's case, it was really just a freak thing that nobody could have predicted happening. My first ride on Tilly was rough. She was nearly impossible to steer and keep straight, and she felt like she wanted to be a runaway. Honestly, if it had been a kid on her, she probably would have. It was pretty disheartening because it was not at all what I expected, but she'd only been here a few days, so I chalked it up to her just needing more time to settle in. The next ride, I decided to lunge Tilly before I got on to see if that made any difference. I think it helped a bit, but it wasn't like she was miraculously a different pony. She stood still for me to get on, and I could at least walk and trot on a longer rein than I could the first ride, but there were still a lot of issues. I brought a crop with me this time because she kept wanting to randomly hit the brakes the first time I rode her, and having a stick with me meant I didn't have to kick her repeatedly to get a reaction. She still had no interest in traveling in a straight line, and getting her to pick up her right lead was still a big struggle. And then of course she was still a little speed racer that would try and run away when she wasn't trying to hit the brakes. I did jump a little cross rail this day just to see what she'd do. Tilly was definitely green going to it, but again, she's in a new place, so I tried not to think too much of it. I just kept coming to the jump until she felt more confident and then quit when she was able to canter the crossrail confidently and quietly each way. I also dropped the crossrail down when I realized she needed a bit of a confidence boost. Overall, this ride was still not super great compared to what I expected the pony to be, but it was definitely better than the first ride, and we had some nice jumps at the end, so I felt a little more optimistic about the situation. Of all the rides Tilly had in the beginning, this one was probably the best. Still speedy, but there were actually some pretty good moments jumping. She was much braver to the jumps. I do think her lack of confidence to the crossrail the first time I jumped her was due to her being in a new place. After that day, I've never seen the pony worry about what she was jumping, not because of the way it looked at least. I left this ride feeling pretty good that we were able to put 3 jumps together, which now seems kind of funny, but at the time it was a really big deal. I think this is maybe the last time I felt optimistic about this pony until after we figured out what was bothering her. Things ended up getting pretty bad. Another big issue that hasn't been talked about yet is Tilly's unwillingness to put the bit in her mouth. She'd literally clamp her mouth shut and make it nearly impossible to open it. Keep in mind, this is a pony I don't know, and every assumption I have of her is based off a video of her at her old home from people I don't personally know. I only saw her be a perfect angel in video and had yet to witness it while she was with me. So there was a small part of me that was scared I might have been lied to. I don't believe that I was, but I think that's a thought that would have crossed anyone's mind given the extreme difference in what this pony was advertised to be versus what showed up. So there was a little bit of me that was like, maybe this pony just needs more training. Well, like a lot more. So I kept trying to see if maybe the pony might start coming around. But after this ride, I started leaning more towards something is wrong. She did get a little better towards the end of this ride, so I let Chloe get on her just to see if maybe the pony simply hated me. I remember telling Chloe before she got on that if Tilly was too bad, I won't make her keep going. But it went okay. It wasn't great or anything. I mean, Tilly wouldn't even trot over a pole in a calm manner. But the pony wasn't so bad that she scared Chloe, so I let Chloe ride her a bit after that. We had this joke for a while that Tilly just liked the kids more. She seemed to be slightly better for them. I eventually realized it was because she liked the saddle they used more, but during that time, it was really hard to see things clearly because I was kind of spiraling trying to figure out why this pony was acting how she was. I also want to be clear, I never expect a horse to show up exactly how they're advertised. Horses will be different based on their programs and environment, and they need time to settle into new routines and people. I've literally never said anything about an issue with the horse to the seller because anything that came up was minor and to be expected. But this was something very different. This pony was clearly mad about something and not at all the same as she was made out to be. I eventually told the seller that the pony was having a lot of issues. I asked if she'd been on Regimate and was basically like, if I'm missing something, please just tell me. No new knowledge was gained from that conversation, but they were willing to talk to me and not block me, so I became even more inclined to believe that something is bothering Tilly rather than I had just been lied to. So, we started with the most simple solution and got her teeth floated. Her teeth were sharp, but it didn't make any notable difference in her behavior. So I kept brainstorming until my vet would be here to see this feral and mean little pony I thought would be a great idea to buy. This day was pretty rough. Tilly started refusing to keep moving out of the corner going to a jump, and I ended up having to get on her to fix the situation. I can't explain what a hard time this was. It was so frustrating because Tilly seemed like she was going to be the perfect addition, and then she showed up and things got progressively worse. It got to the point where she was kind of scary. I felt like I had to walk on eggshells around her. Any little thing could set her off. It was just hard. I was so sad about her. And then I had an epiphany. And admittedly, it took me a little too long to get to this point. I realized that she might have gotten ulcers while she was being shipped here, and I guess because she's a little pony, I didn't really think of her as being prone to ulcers. It's something that I would associate more with my thoroughbreds because the only time that's been an issue has been with them. It definitely made the most sense. After this ride, I accepted that nothing I was doing was making things better. I actually don't think I finished this ride. I'm pretty sure I stopped when the cantering was this bad because I was like, this is just not okay and I'm done. She was getting meaner and more dangerous, and it was just time to stop. Thankfully, my vet would be here soon, and she could watch video and look at this pony in person and see where she thinks we should start. Since Tilly was consistently mean and just like always upset, we all agreed that treating her for ulcers was the best place to start. So we started treating with a generic omeprazole that I've used on my other horses with success, and we also did this little test to find a supplement that would work for her and ended up on CRS. She got a chiro that day as well, and then I basically left her alone for the first 2 weeks of treatment. When we got to the halfway point, I started working with her a little bit again. The 2 weeks that Tilly had off were used by me to erase my negative feelings towards this pony because I knew if there was any hope at this point for Tilly, I needed a fresh perspective. We started slow and went back to basics. At this point, we all needed to build some sort of relationship with Tilly. Nobody at the barn really liked her at this point, and it sounds mean, I know, but all we knew of her was that she's this angry little girl that wants to attack us all. I did my best to treat her like I was just meeting her for the first time, which, given the emotional stress involved with this situation, it was a hard thing to do. For the last 2 weeks of her treatment, and maybe a few weeks after, things were a lot better with Tilly.
Like a turtle now.
She wasn't magically perfect, although she did become so much easier to bridle. Like, once she started feeling better, she accepted the bit no problem, so that was actually like a miracle right there. But just in general, she was a lot nicer to be around, and she was actually trainable. I could half halt and try to work with her without fearing that she's gonna blow up. It was a nice little glimpse into the pony she actually is. Unfortunately, it didn't last. Around the end of June 2023, Tilly was back to being angry again. This time, it was at least easier to believe Tilly when she was saying something was wrong. It was really hard the first time because I didn't know the pony at all. When she got upset this time, I didn't try to keep riding her in a hope that it would get better. She undeniably was a different pony when she was being treated for ulcers, so we at least knew we were on the right track. After this ride, I just waited for my vet to get here again so that we could revisit the drawing board on Tilly. We wanted to stay on the ulcer route, just go about it a little bit differently. So this time we did a succeed test, which basically you take a fecal sample and you can use it to detect ulcers. She tested positive for hindgut ulcers, so we treated her for ulcers again, but this time with GastroGuard. Unfortunately, that's a little bit more expensive, but it's what the pony needed, so we did it. We also redid her test to see if she liked the CRS still, and her body said no. It's super weird, I know, but I've come to believe in this little test because it's helped more of my horses than just Tilly. So we stopped with the CRS and switched to Zestera and bentonite clay. Tilly had another 2 weeks off while we started her second ulcer treatment. These clips here are the first clips I have of her after we started treating with GastroGuard. She seemed a bit happier, so I kept riding her while we finished her treatment. That being said, Tilly still needed a lot of training. She's always wanted to be quite heavy on the forehand, and I know it was a big adjustment for her to start balancing herself better. She's also never been happy to pick up her right lead. It was such a struggle for her. She would sometimes get pretty mad when I tried to help her balance to pick it up. Keep in mind, Tilly's been getting regular chiros, and we've gone over her body multiple times to make sure there's nothing else causing her pain or making her not want to pick up her lead, etc. Some issues are truly just training related, and this was one of them. I don't have any video, but I would lunge her and try and get her to pick up her right lead on her own. Sometimes horses do better learning things without a rider on their back, but it didn't work for Tilly. So what I came up with for her was doing a simple change across the diagonal to ask for her right lead. That was the best way for her to start picking that lead up consistently. I think this is how I realized that Tilly likes the kids' saddle better. I got on her before Chloe, and I didn't want to switch saddles, so I used the kids' one. After this day, I'm in the smaller saddle that Tilly was happier in, so I'm assuming that this is the day when I put another piece together for this pony. I mainly just flatted Tilly for a while and worked on getting her to slow down and relax. I would do a few jumps with her here and there, and I basically just restarted her. The poor pony had to have been in so much pain, and I think especially jumping like that, she developed some trauma with it. So her getting as much of a fresh start as I could give her is definitely what Tilly needed. This was a really good day. Chloe got a really nice, relaxed canter from Tilly. It was a much needed mood booster for all of us with Tilly. The pony was definitely happier and no longer as explosive as she was when her ulcers were bothering her. But as you've seen, things were still far from perfect. Any ounce of reassurance that we're going in the right direction was always a big relief because for a while this pony really made me doubt myself. The cantering still needed work in the outdoor. Chloe wasn't able to get the same relaxed canter that she had in the indoor. But a little progress is better than the constant feeling of going backwards like it was when Tilly first got here. I think by this point we were done with her second ulcer treatment, or at least starting to taper her off the GastroGuard. I was starting to jump her a little more. Like I said, I pretty much restarted her, so we only trotted jumps. My main concern was keeping her quiet and showing her that it can be okay now. I was really happy with Tilly again this day. We trotted a few jumps and she was quiet to every single one. I'm showing you guys the worst parts of Tilly's rides and not hiding any of the head tossing or moments where she's still getting angry with me. But despite all that, things really were on a better track with Tilly because I started using her for lessons besides Chloe. It was a little bit of a rough start for Erilyn at the beginning, but it was pretty good by the end of her lesson. Tilly was trotting single jumps quietly, so I started working on cantering poles. It looks a lot like the same issues as before, but I can't tell you how much different she felt. Before, she was ready to blow up at any second, and now she was still angry when I asked something of her that she didn't know how or want to do, but she didn't feel explosive. I'm pretty sure everyone on the ground that was filming for me during this time maybe thought I was a little crazy because I was like, oh my gosh, no, she's so much better. And it definitely doesn't look so much better right now, but I could at least work with this pony. Like, she was present enough to learn, and I didn't have that with her before. This day she was mad because I wouldn't let her lean out past my outside aids. If I had less outside rein and let her do what she wanted through the turns, I'm pretty sure the head tossing would have stopped. But then I wouldn't have really been training her. Some of the anger too was because I insisted her pace stay the same in front of the pole. Really, all the head tossing during this time was from her just trying to avoid me when I asked her to stay straight or not speed up. I said this earlier too, but I'm sure trauma from working with ulcers played a part in this as well, especially when it came to cantering jumps and jumping lines. But as long as I felt like I was making progress throughout the ride, then I was gonna keep trying with this pony. If it ever got to where she got angrier throughout the ride, then I would have stopped and we would have had to rethink things with Tilly again. But thankfully it never came to that. I also just want to add that obviously horses handle pain differently, and Tilly has proven that she is not going to hide anything. If there is something bothering her, she's going to let you know. So not every horse with ulcers is going to behave like Tilly. Some are going to hide it more and they might have different symptoms. But of any horse that we've ever suspected to have ulcers, Tilly is by far the worst. The kids did walk trot with Tilly while I worked on her canter and jumping. She was pretty happy just trotting around poles with them. If you remember in the beginning, Tilly wasn't even open to that idea, so seeing her like this with the kids made me pretty happy. This is the first day I tried cantering a jump with Tilly again. We started with a ground pole, and when I felt like she was listening to what I was asking rather than just tossing her head to avoid me, we turned it into a cross rail. This day was honestly pretty rough. There were some okay moments at the end, but it took a while to get there. Thankfully, this day is the last day that Tilly tossed her head to this extent. This ride had me questioning things with this pony again, but thankfully after today, things started getting a lot better. By the fall of 2023, Tilly was really starting to turn into a different pony. She was getting more comfortable with keeping her canter balanced and not getting heavy and quick. It took a lot of repetition and really just staying consistent in what I was asking, but it eventually started to make sense to her. We were able to canter courses of ground poles without any major issues. Tilly was making so much progress that I even let Chloe try jumping her again. We only used a cross rail going across the short side of the arena because I noticed that it made Tilly less inclined to speed up. Trotting the cross rail went so well that I even let Chloe try cantering it once. Tilly was great. It was a really good day. From here, I started working on cantering little cross rails with Tilly. She was getting more receptive to half halts and not freaking out trying to run at the jumps. She was starting to get kind of fun to ride. You'll see cantering lines was still a work in progress, but it really wasn't that bad given where we started. The main issue still was just getting her to stay straight. There were still occasional moments that she'd want to gallop into the line, and if I felt like she wanted to run through my hand, I'd halt, give her a minute, go do a single jump, and then make my way back to the line and try again. Her right lead was also still a struggle, but the pony was far more reasonable now, so it really wasn't too difficult to deal with. Since Tilly was so good the last time Chloe jumped her, the kids started getting more privileges to jump Tilly. I only let them trot jumps during this time because I still didn't have enough faith in Tilly maintaining her pace on her own, and I didn't want her to get confused that sometimes she could be a speed racer, but with me there's none of that. I wanted her to always be told the same thing, that we're slow and calm and we're just a nice young lady now. Chloe did a great job with Tilly this day, and I let her be the first one to jump the butterfly fillers with Tilly. Tilly was great to the jump the first time and willingly kept her trot. I was proud of her for that because it was the first vertical she's jumped in quite a while. I wasn't too mad about the canter steps in front of the jump the last time because Tilly was respectful about it and not trying to run. I would have obviously liked to see her keep her trot the whole way, but it didn't feel like a battle worth picking when it's a jump she hasn't seen before and a kid pilot. So now my main goal was getting Tilly more comfortable jumping lines. I also started reintroducing verticals, but only as single jumps for now. The big thing for me was to make sure I didn't overface Tilly during this time. The last thing I wanted to do was create even more anxiety with jumping. I was really happy with Tilly to the verticals today. She was a little stronger than I would have liked, but she held it together and didn't try to bolt to the jumps or toss her head. She had the tendency to get like that, more so when the jumps were verticals or she was jumping lines, so the fact that she remained rideable to verticals was a big win today. Lines were still a challenge. Some days were better than others. Tilly has a pretty big stride and can easily make it down the line in a large pony stride, but I stayed insistent that she do the small pony step because that's what she is. It was hard for her and took a lot of repetition to get her how I wanted, but anytime she let me hold her together down the line, that's when she was done for the day. The kids started riding Tilly a lot more during this time. Chloe started really working on cantering Tilly and even started cantering poles. As you'll see, we used a pole across the short side of the arena again to help Tilly be more inclined to maintain her pace. I even let Erilyn canter Tilly for the first time. This was her first time cantering a small pony, so it was a bit of an adjustment compared to a bigger pony or horse. Tilly was super patient with Erilyn, and it was another one of those days that gave me more reassurance that we are in fact heading in the right direction with this pony. Chloe jumped Tilly a lot during the winter months. She jumped a few lines with Tilly this day. It looks like she cantered into this line. In a perfect world, there would have been a 5 here, but given the circumstances, it wasn't the end of the world. Tilly looked far more sane jumping with a kid than she did when she first got here, so I let it slide. They trotted into a line off the right, and that was done in the small pony step, so overall it was a good day. We discovered this long ago, but Tilly was a lot more relaxed in the indoor, so Chloe was able to canter more jumps with Tilly in there. She also did a lot of trot pulls with Tilly during this time, and she was even the guinea pig to see how Tilly was when you rode without stirrups. I started riding Tilly more again now. Not because she was doing anything bad with the kids, but there was just still more work to do with her rideability to jumps. From this day on, I think the head tossing stopped. We didn't have to do the lines multiple times just to get it somewhat sane anymore. She was pretty willing to listen now. The previous ride when I jumped this line, it took so many times to get her to chill out, and this ride she stayed pretty rideable her first time cantering the line each way, so she only did a few jumps this day. After this ride, Tilly had some time off due to the weather, and then all of the issues with Bacardi happened, and I just didn't really have the motivation to ride. So now we're in February of this year, and this was Tilly's first jump school since coming back into work. I had no idea what to expect, but she really surprised me with how good she was. We only jumped cross rails, but she was great to every jump. Things got better and better from here. Tilly was a completely different pony compared to the one we first met. She was happy and pleasant to be around, and nobody had to hold their breath and watch their step around her anymore. I kept working on the same things when I jumped her, but started adding more verticals. This ride, Tilly only jumped verticals, and these jumps in the next few clips are literally the only jumps she did that day. She jumped her first line of all verticals since her little restart over fences, and she was perfect. It didn't faze her, and she didn't get anxious. There was also a massive difference in Tilly's canter. She was able to start balancing herself and no longer needed a constant half halt for me to keep her light on her front end.
Tilly! Tilly, no!
She was able to canter on a loose rein, and even on the buckle. There was zero chance of being able to do that when she first got here. I started to be able to just mess around with her. She was perfectly content doing this pokey little trot and trotting poles in whatever ridiculous impromptu course I came up with. I even cantered some poles on a loose rein with her this ride. Again, zero chance of that happening before. After everything we went through with this pony, it was such a relief seeing her this happy and content. She was getting slower and more relaxed with the kids. Everything was just so much better, and no one was scared of the pony anymore. She was pretty consistent and reliable now. I honestly felt like we'd never get to this point. It's truly so hard to believe a pony you don't know at all and have never seen behave any differently than she did when she showed up here. If she'd shown up how she is now and then had issues, it would have been far easier to know she's in some sort of pain. It's hard to know if any of the training issues would have still been issues if she never got ulcers. My guess is there still would have been a little regardless of the ulcers, because I was definitely asking her to carry herself differently than she was used to. And she's shown that she will always express her opinions on things. And on the bright side, we at least know that Tilly is honest and won't hide her feelings. And we know that if she goes to any horse shows or leaves the property for any reason, she needs omeprazole. I hate that Tilly had to go through any of this. But again, there was no way of predicting any of this would happen to a pony who is really quite chill now that we know the real her. I'm just glad we ended up in a place where Tilly is happy again, and all of our relationships with the pony are starting to be repaired. I'm pretty fond of Tilly now. There were times when I had to block all emotions just to get along with the pony and try to help her. Now I really like riding her, and I like watching the kids ride her. There's no quick fix when it comes to training horses. I think sometimes people want there to be, and there's just not. Being consistent in what you're asking and making a little progress each ride will eventually lead to big results. Tilly is the perfect example of that. She's also the perfect example that you should always listen to your horse, even if you don't know them so well. If we never treated Tilly for ulcers, I don't even want to know where the pony would be now. This time last year, we were just meeting Tilly and starting this whole long, hard road with her. It's been an emotional roller coaster, to say the least, with this pony, but I'm really happy with where she's at now.
Look amazing. Just maybe gotta like sit up just a little bit more, maybe. Oh, that's so much better.
That was a workout. But for real, if we had done that with her when she first got here, I would have been on the ground.
I was planning on ending the video with that, but I had a really good jump school in Tilly that absolutely has to be in here. She jumped the first oxer that she's seen since her first few rides here, and it went much better. She jumped it twice. The first time she was a little long to it, which I've spent most of the past year working to get this pony to hold herself together and fit the right step into lines, so it's not a problem I'm mad about. The second time she jumped this line, I'm literally obsessed with. I just let her canter down the line and I didn't really have to do anything and she just kept going along. And then I also got brave and jumped the logs and she was perfect.